Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords. and I kind of debated whether I was even going to do this video, but you know what the hell, I had to do a video about it. First of all, check out Cults of Chaos. I forgot to put this on their last video when I was talking about, in my previous videos, I was talking about Warhammer versus Albion and the kind of the difference in the paradigms. If you've never bought Cults of Chaos, check it out. It's the most incredible engine, I guess you say, generator that I've ever come up with for making sinister sects and groups and basically everything you need to set up a complete scenario over and over again. You can use it infinitely. And anybody who's bought it knows how good it is. Anyway. Today, I'm obviously going to talk about OneDnD and what they've been announcing now is their new huge change, tremendously important, something that everybody has been. Oh, there she is. It's Meatball. Something that everybody's been clamoring for, obviously, since the beginning of the hobby itself. Hey, Meatball. Psst. Hi. There she is. Since the beginning of the hobby itself, everybody said, you know what? We have to be conscientious of racial politics that might emerge 50 years from now because a group of insane neo-Marxists want to destroy Western civilization. And so, we shouldn't use the term race in RPGs. The term race, right? So OneDnD, if you haven't heard, has announced, and as usual, they've got like Jeremy Crawford doing these pathetic videos explaining it, that it turns out that having race, like in the game, right? Like you choose your class, you choose your race, you roll your attributes, etc. That word is itself just fundamentally evil. And using it at all is harmful to minorities because it suggests, I don't know what. I honestly don't know what it even suggests, because it's like, okay, that race is a kind of a category that exists. But the way it's used in D&D is nothing to do with the way it's ever been used in the context of like social politics. Because, obviously it is technically true that in standard social conversation, people talk about race, especially leftists. They obsessively talk about race all the time, right? They're constantly bringing up race. It's the most important thing in the world to them, except for maybe gender. And it is something that they consider to be of extreme human importance. But if it's being used in an RPG, then that's awful and offensive and dangerous. Why? We have no idea. So they talk about race, and they talk about it in the sense of suggesting that there are different races of human. Right, that there is such a thing as a white race and a black race and an Asian race or yellow race or whatever you want to call it, and that that these divisions are really significant, and they actually have this huge connotation in terms of social policy and politics and everything else. And of course that's all bullshit. First of all, but second, that's not really what a race is supposed to imply, and certainly in Dungeons and Dragons. Race, when you're talking about the character race, you're talking about human versus, note, all human, right? Regardless of skin color is one race. And then you have another race that's the elves. And then you have the dwarves. And then you have weirdo races. And those are different races, right? So race in this context, they're claiming now, that it was never an appropriate word, right? Because it suggests biological difference. Well, yeah, it does. It literally does, because you're talking about a race of beings, right? The problem is they want to think that, orcs are black people and elves are Belgians or something like that. I don't know what elves are supposed to be, but they think the only way they understand anything is as an analogy to their racial and gender politics. Therefore, an elf and a dwarf can't be symbolic of things that they were symbolic of in traditional myth. No, they just have to be obviously white supremacist analogs for other races and in some way inherently problematic and offensive, right? So they really should just come out with an article saying, everybody involved in D&D here at OneDnD despise D&D and everything about RPGs the way they are, and we just don't want them to exist anymore, because that's what they're really saying here, right? They're saying there's something fundamentally wrong with the entire concept, maybe even of playing a role, right? Because obviously, like, if you're playing a character that isn't what you are, that's some kind of cultural appropriation too, right? All of that is leading to the fact that now in OneDnD, they're getting rid of race and they're replacing it with species. So first, you notice that this is a completely cosmetic change that does nothing, right? It just means they're changing one word to another word. Second, a species that's I don't know. I don't understand how that's better or worse, right? Because if does that mean that now orcs aren't black people anymore to leftists? Like, if they say, "Oh, no, species, that's different. The orc species aren't black people, but we think that the orc race are black people, and that's where we have the problem, right? Because leftists are mentally ill, right? And they insist on this belief that they want to project their racism on others, right? They feel guilt about their own internalized racism, and they therefore project that other people are thinking that orcs are black people. They're the only ones that think orcs are black people, and that's the cause of the entire problem, is that these people are deranged, these leftists are deranged, and they're attributing something that nobody else believes or stands for or is trying to promote. Right? Only they promote the idea that orcs are black people, which is an unbelievably offensive idea, right? Because first, it's literally dehumanizing them. In fact, the whole critical race theory perspective works out of the presumption that only white people are really the standard human, right? And then, it's the most racist thing. The Klan couldn't have come up with a better concept than what critical race theory does. It suggests that every other type of race is in some way inferior, so that it can't possibly live up unassisted to the power and capacity of the white people. And therefore, you need to create a segregationist system that prevents whites from using those natural advantages that critical race theorists think they have, right? That nobody else can have, right? Like, you can't expect non-white people to show up to work on time, even though somehow billions of them do every day, right? And you can't expect non-white people to think rationally, even though, again, billions of them do every day. But according to the CRT people, who probably the problem is just themselves, they're inferior human beings, right? The people that push these racial politics, like all collectivists, it's part of the essence of being a collectivist, is that you want to take a captured credit, and you want a group credit for something other people have done because you're incapable of doing anything yourself, right? So this is why you hate, if you're a collectivist, you hate individualism, because you know that as an individual, you kind of suck, don't you? You're just garbage, and you end up, and so you end up wanting to take credit as a group, whether that group is your working class, or whether that group is the revolution, or whether that group is the government, or whether that group is your race, or your gender, or your sexuality. And so, but then inherent in that is that you have to create this fantasy of there being these conflicts that don't really exist. Anyways, back to the D&D topic. So they're apparently just going on as they've been going before, but they're going to change race to species, which is stupid because that's not what it was traditionally. First of all, second, species sounds like something that would marginally be acceptable as a science fiction game, but it doesn't really sound right in a fantasy game, does it? And race, of course, there's nothing wrong. The fundamental thing, you can make all those arguments, but the fundamental thing is that there's nothing wrong with the term race. It's a perfectly acceptable term that they're trying to claim is somehow evil or unacceptable to use, which is wrong. It is not in any way evil or unacceptable to use, because we're talking about races of being, right? The elves are a race of beings. Dragons are a race of beings. That is exactly the correct way to use the word race. There's no problem with doing it. And we all know that they're doing it purely to push this agenda, to virtue signal to the woke extremists that have infiltrated the hobby, and to intentionally make a challenge to regular gamers, where if regular gamers object to this, they can now be pushed out of the hobby. They can be it's a justification for saying, well, you shouldn't be, if you don't believe that the term species is the correct term for your D&D game, then obviously you have no place in this hobby. Get out of here. You don't belong in our hobby, dude who's been here for 40 years, because their long-term goal is the end of the hobby. They don't want the hobby to exist, and at least not in any way resembling what it does. They want it for indoctrination and propaganda purposes, and to create something that is intentionally the opposite kind of the experience of what RPG play actually is. So, that's the long and the short of what they're up to. But the ironic thing is, of course, that it's also immediately was responded to by a representative, of the extreme left. Daniel Kwan immediately went on Twitter, who works for Wizards, right? He's published stuff for Wizards. And he is now rewarding Wizards by once again calling them Nazis, right? So here he went on Twitter and he immediately said, changing the word race to species is not good enough. It's actually worse. It makes everything worse because it doesn't address bioessentialism, which is the real problem, right? And so essentially he's saying that Wizards are Nazis, that the Wizards of the Coast people are Nazis. He works for Wizards. Wizards pays him money to go on Twitter and insult them, right? I wonder if anyone in Hasbro knows about that, right? Like if they understand what's going on there, right? Kwan goes there, and of course he gets all of the crowd riled up, and they're all saying this is completely not good enough for what we want, right? We demand that it be more. And I'm not sure exactly what else they want it to be. I think I know what they want it to be, because he elaborates a little bit. He says about the essentialism is the problem, right? This biological essentialism, he says, because SJWs are now no longer satisfied with the invented concept of race that they didn't really make it up entirely themselves, because there were other people using it before. They borrowed it from their people, the people that think the most like them, the clan, right? Klansmen talk about race, and SJWs talk about race. They have the same theory. They're just on opposite teams, right? That's all. They believe in all of the same things, right? The clan and SJWs both believe that skin color and genetic making is one of the most essential parts of human being, right? They both believe that your skin color determines your capacities and your destiny. They believe that certain skin colors are inherently evil and others are inherently victims that can never be evil. They both distrust Jews. Like, they're exactly the same. They're just on opposite teams. They both want segregation. They both look dubiously at interracial marriage or adoptions, right? They're the same people. And so these guys, when it came to race, they borrowed this part of the theory from the Klansmen, the use of the term, right? But they want to go beyond that because they're postmodernists, and part of what they want to do is go to war not just with Western civilization or with humanity, but with reality itself. So part of the argument here is that as long as you keep having any distinction at all, as long as you have, whether you call it race or species, and you got to grant Kwan that one point at least, which is that actually Wizards changed nothing except a word, right? They changed one word to another word to use the exact same thing that they were doing. So he's got a point there. But that as long as you have the category, you are suggesting that certain species of living things can do some things that other species of living things cannot. And that is Nazism. That is white supremacy. If you believe that a cat can do something that a bird can't, and a bird can do something that a cat can't, you, sir, are a Nazi. That is essentially what they're teaching here now, right? Like that any kind of concept of difference that is inherent and that you can't choose out of your identity, right? Because this is part of the issue too now, and here's where you get into the real muck and mire of these questions, right? Because you ask like, well, was Rachel Dolezal actually wrong, like by being a completely white woman pretending to be a black woman? And if she is, then why is Talcum X right? Because it's the same thing, right? But so it has to do with people who belong to a certain ideological alignment can choose their own reality, and nobody's allowed to question that reality. If you question that reality, you'll be severely punished. People who do not belong to that ideological alignment are not allowed to question anybody's reality, and are not allowed to define their own either. It has to be defined for them, and they must accept it. That's, I think, the way to describe the whole body politic of what the SJWs believe the relationship is with reality. So what they want is a reality where leftists get to decide anything is true, nothing is true rather, and everything is permitted. They can define reality in any way they want. Nobody can question them, and no one else can counter-define, right? That's important. They're the only ones that decide what reality is. And so, if you have species, those species have to have things that make them different, and that theoretically one species wouldn't have that another one would. And that's what they want to change. And so I think you're going to see that OneDnD is going to ultimately end up having stuff like, can you have a flying halfling? Yes, not only can you, but you must be allowed to have a flying halfling that just can fly for no reason at all, right? Or to have, a dwarf that shoots lasers out of his eyes, right? Like if any race can shoot lasers out of its eyes, then a dwarf must be able to also, right? And of course, and there shouldn't be any definitions of appearance either, right? Like there can be 10-foot tall halflings and 3-inch tall storm giants, right? And none of that is like relevant in any way, because none of those things can be defined. Nothing should be defined because nothing is real. That is the fundamental essence of the postmodernist concept. It's a war against reality. And interestingly, that's really bad in general, obviously. Anybody who's living their life this way is leading a life that at best is going to be useless, and at worst will sooner or later just hit a 16-ton truck of tragedy in the real world, right? But in a gaming world, this is even, in a way, this is even worse. This is like absolute poison, right? Because the whole thing that makes the experience of a game world work, no matter how serious it is, whether it's like serious on the level of Lion and Dragon, or whether it's like gonzo weird on the level of World of the Last Sun, right? No matter which end of that spectrum it is, it has to have a structure of things that are true and things that are real within the world, right? Like Lion and Dragon obviously is set in medieval Europe, and it's the world as it really was in medieval Europe to the way that the people of that world understood it, right? So yes, monsters are real, magic is real, but it's the real monsters and magic as medieval people thought really did exist in medieval people times, right? World of the Last Sun is this crazy post-apocalyptic fantasy sci-fi world that has all kinds of wild stuff, including some things that are clearly funny and in some way meta-referential. It has a bunch of weird things that at first glance seem to make no sense at all. But one of the very important things when I created this setting, and which you have to do if you want to create a sensible weird fantasy or gonzo setting, is that I determined to myself single thing that appears in the world has to have an explanation, it has to have a reason, and it has to fit the rules of the world. It can be as weird and wild as you want within that, because the rules themselves of the universe can be very weird and wild. But they can't just be do whatever, oh my God, so random. When you hit oh my God, so random, then it all falls apart because you lose all ability to actually immerse yourself, because you can't really understand what to expect in the virtual world. In the physical world, SJWs have the benefit of going around living in this fantasy where they think they can create their own reality, because underlying that, they know that they are lying to themselves, right? Underneath that, they know that if they just walk to a wall, you're not going to slip through that wall and enter the magical land of Hogwarts or something, they're just going to break their nose. So they don't do it, right? They're playing pretend. They're like infantile, retarded children who have got this idea in their brain and they're repeating it over and over again. And they know it's not true even, but especially everyone around them knows it's not true. But they're holding a gun, and that's why they've become such a problem. Somebody has to deal with this eventually. But most of them don't end up actually immediately killing themselves, right? Because of their completely faulty view of the world. Because underneath, they know that they're pretending. They know they're lying to themselves and everybody else about how the world works. So they don't accidentally end up, walking into traffic. Only the people that have completely lost any sense of coherence about what really is real versus what they would wish was real would be in that sort of a situation. But in a game, for the game setting to work, you have to understand. There has to be definition. So because there is no. You're in a virtual world. You can't have any other reference besides the virtual world itself, right? So if you're in a virtual world where there are no rules at all about what can be what and how things are or how to define anything, then that world becomes essentially unplayable as any kind of a meaningful setting, because it's a world where no player knows what's going to happen next in any way, right? Like they can be like, oh, well, suddenly your sword explodes, and your boot turns into a bouquet of flowers, right? Because for no reason, because it doesn't matter, because we can do anything we want here, because if you don't agree, you're a white supremacist. Like that, if that's the structure of what they're arguing for, it falls to pieces, right? It all goes apart. And maybe that's what the goal is, really. But anyways, it's ironic as usual. I mean, like, part of why I was not super keen on doing this video is because this is just a repetition of a pattern that I've been showing you in these videos for quite some time, right? Wizards of the Coast, which has been infiltrated by Wokists and controlled by Wokists, is now pushing a new point, a new level of the woke agenda. And the Wokists on Twitter and Mastodon now, I guess, a lot of them are leaving Twitter, thankfully. They're now reacting by saying this is absolutely not enough. In fact, this is horrible, and you're just as evil as you were a second ago, right? And so that'll then prompt the same Wokists at Wizards of the Coast. It's literally the same Wokists, right? The guy making the announcement, Crawford, works for Wizards of the Coast. He's a super Wokist. The guy complaining, Daniel Kwan, works for Wizards of the Coast. He's a super Wokist, right? It's a circle jerk, right? It's all set up so that the company, the bosses higher up, will be like, oh, well, I guess you've got to, right? Like they're playing a puppet show for the Hasbro executives, hoping they can keep fooling them into derailing D&D ever further, And I guess that's the only reason I'm bringing it up again, because we have to keep showing and exposing what's going on here. Anyways, if you like this video, please share it. If you haven't already, please subscribe. Hit that like button. Support Meatball. Meatball's digging in there right now. She's doing some serious grooming. If you can, share this video everywhere you possibly can so that people find out about it. Anywhere you think people find this interesting or important to know, or anywhere that you think people will anywhere that you think people will get pissed off about it too, And if you want to support my work, check out my products. I've got big news. The Gonzo Fantasy Companion, I think that's what we're going to call it now. The Gonzo Fantasy Companion, Spectre Press, is coming out with it. It is going to be the next volume of my weird fantasy series. World of the Last Sun was the first one. The second one is going to be not so much setting. This one was like the places of the World of the Last Sun. The next one is going to be for all kinds of weird Gonzo fantasy stuff you can put into your OSR game that includes races and species, I guess it would be, races of creatures, hipster elves, mutant humans, animal player characters, weird race generators, robots, and then it's going to have a bunch of stuff on Gonzo dungeon crawling, ancient complexes. What else has it got? It's got weird creatures and items. It's got it's just going to be this huge volume full of resources of stuff you can pick and mix and match. You can use, obviously all of them come out of World of the Last Sun, but it's not tied to the setting. You can use these, mostly not tied to the setting. You can use this stuff in any weird fantasy system, and it's going to be like 220 pages. So it's coming out, I don't know if it's coming out before Christmas, or probably it's going to come out just after. It's probably going to come out in the new year, but keep an eye open for it. And meanwhile, pick up my books, right? Like if you want to support me, buy my products, whether it's Lion and Dragon or Cults of Chaos, Dark Albion, World of the Last Sun, Invisible College, Star Adventure, or any of my RPG Pundit Presents PDF series. The links are all in the description below. You check it out. You're getting something that you can actually use in your gaming, and that I promise you will be about the gaming, not about anything else. It's not an indoctrination. It's not about political messaging. It's about really good OSR gaming, compatible with, all OSR games and the editions of D&D. So be sure to support me, and especially share the video. Currently smoking Bladder Diplomat plus Cornell and Deal's Old Joe Krantz.